The sheet of paper in your hand was once a living tree. To turn it into paper, that tree was shredded, boiled in chemicals hotter than boiling water, and had its own natural glue ripped out from the inside. Then it was bleached from dark brown to blinding white. And here is the strangest part: the factory that makes your paper runs almost entirely on its own garbage. It burns the glue it removes to power itself. By the end of this video, I'll show you the machine longer than a football field that turns watery soup into finished paper at the speed of a car on the highway. Don't skip it, it's mesmerizing. But first, a quick question. How many pieces of paper do you think you touch in a single day? Not just books, receipts, packaging, tissue, coffee cups, money, that box on your doorstep. Count them and drop the number in the comments. I read them, and almost everyone guesses way too low. And if you love finding out how the world really works, subscribe. Every week we crack open another industry nobody thinks about. Paper feels ordinary. It shouldn't. For most of human history, it was a luxury only the rich could afford. It was invented in China around 2,000 years ago, and for centuries it was made by hand, one precious sheet at a time. What changed everything was a chemical process, one so clever it made paper cheap enough for the entire world for the very first time. That process starts not in a factory, but in a forest. It begins with wood, but not logs. Paper is made mostly from wood chips and sawdust, the leftovers of sawmills. At a large mill, hundreds of truckloads of this wood fiber arrive every single day. Each truck is tilted up to a steep angle and simply emptied, dumping tons of chips at once. But here's something most people never realize about wood. A freshly delivered wood chip is only about a quarter useful. Roughly half of it is just water. Another quarter is a substance called lignin. And only the last quarter, the cellulose fiber, is what actually becomes paper. So before you can make a single sheet, you have to tear the wood apart at the molecular level and throw most of it away. And the real enemy in that wood is the lignin. Lignin is nature's glue. It's the substance that holds wood fibers together and makes a tree stiff and strong. It's brilliant for building a tree. It's a disaster for making paper. Leave it in, and your paper turns brittle, brown, and weak. So the entire first half of paper making is really just one violent mission: rip out the glue. To do that, the wood chips are fed into a giant steel vessel called a digester. And a digester is exactly what it sounds like: an enormous pressure cooker several stories tall. Inside, the chips are blasted with steam and drowned in a special chemical bath called white liquor. Think of it as an incredibly powerful soap. As the heat and pressure climb, that soap goes to work, dissolving the lignin glue and loosening the wood fibers until the solid chips collapse into a mushy pulp. The glue that held a tree together for decades is torn apart in a matter of hours. Now watch what happens to that dissolved glue, because this is the genius part. The used cooking liquid, now black and full of dissolved lignin, is called black liquor. And instead of being dumped, it's boiled down and set on fire. That's right, the factory burns the very glue it just removed, and that burning glue generates enough steam and electricity to help run the entire mill. The plant is partly powered by its own waste, but it gets even smarter. When the black liquor finishes burning, the leftover chemicals are recovered, treated with lime, and transformed right back into fresh white liquor, ready to cook the next batch of wood, white to black to green and back to white, around and around, almost nothing wasted. This loop is called the craft process, and this single recycling trick is the reason paper went from a luxury of kings to something you crumple up and throw in the bin without a thought. But even now, the pulp isn't ready. Fresh from the digester, it's still a dull, dirty brown because tiny traces of lignin cling to the fibers. So the pulp moves to the bleaching stations, where it's washed with bleaching agents and water, step after step. With each stage, the fiber grows lighter, brown to tan to cream to a brilliant, pure white. And this is where I can answer a question you've had your whole life without knowing it. Why does old newspaper turn yellow? Cheap newsprint is made fast, leaving some lignin behind. And when that leftover lignin meets sunlight and air, it darkens. That yellowing newspaper in the attic is literally the ghost of the tree, still reacting years later. Expensive book paper stays white for centuries because its lignin was fully removed. Now you know. With the pulp finally clean and white, it's time for the moment I promised you. And it is genuinely one of the most incredible machines on earth. The pulp at this stage is over 99% water, a thin, watery soup you could pour like milk. That soup is sprayed onto a giant moving mesh screen at the head of a paper machine, a machine that can stretch longer than a football field. The instant the soup hits the mesh, water begins draining away, and the cellulose fibers tangle together into a fragile, wet mat. Then that mat races through the machine, squeezed between massive rollers and dried against steam-heated cylinders, faster and faster, until it's flying through at speeds of up to 100 kilometers an hour. Water goes in as soup at one end. Finished paper rolls out at highway speed on the other. A single one of these machines can produce enough paper every day to stretch across an entire country. And through all of this, there is one silent ingredient without which none of it works: water. Paper mills drink water on a scale that's hard to imagine. A large mill can use millions of gallons every single day to cook, to wash, to cool, and to carry the pulp through the factory like a river. But it isn't simply thrown away. Modern mills recycle that water over and over, and when it's finally released back into the river, it's filtered, cleaned, and purified through systems that cost millions, because a mill that poisons its own river doesn't last long. So the next time you tear off a receipt, wipe your hands with a tissue, or open a cardboard box, stop for 1 second and think about what you're really holding. A living tree, shredded and dissolved, its glue burned to make the very electricity that dried it, bleached from brown to white, and shot through a machine the length of a football field at highway speed. The most ordinary thing in the world, and one of the most extraordinary processes ever invented. If this changed the way you see a simple sheet of paper, hit that like button, and tell me in the comments which everyday object we should tear apart next. Subscribe, because next week we crack open another